I should have known something was off the moment the silence felt louder than my thoughts. After 10 years in the Marines, I thought I'd seen everything. Dust storms in Kandahar, bodies half buried in jungle soil, even the look in a man's eyes when he knows he's not making it home. But none of it prepared me for this silence. The kind that presses against your ears like pressure underwater, like the world is holding its breath. The gravel crunched under my boots as I walked up to the cabin. Old gray wood, paint peeling off like dead skin. The roof sagged in the middle, and the windows were clouded over with dust, like the place was trying not to see what it had become. Uncle Raymond hadn't spoken to anyone in the family for nearly 2 decades. Discharged under mysterious conditions, disappeared into the mountains, and then silence. Until 3 weeks ago, when I got a letter from a lawyer telling me the cabin was now mine. No funeral, no will, just a cabin, and one line written in his scratchy handwriting on the envelope. There are things you'll understand now, Noah. Things you need to see. I didn't come looking for ghosts. I came because I couldn't sleep anymore. Because the city felt like a trap, and the noise never stopped. Because I had nowhere else to go. Inside the cabin, the air was thick and cold, like the place had been holding itself together just long enough for someone to finally open the door. Dust floated in beams of sunlight like ash. The living room was simple, stone fireplace, worn-out couch, stack of old books beside a rusting lantern. And that smell, not rot, not mold, something older, almost metallic. I dropped my bag near the fireplace and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. This place was mine now. Quiet, secluded, forgotten. It should have felt like peace. It didn't. The first night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of memories or dreams, but because the silence never stopped. Even in the woods, there's supposed to be sound. Crickets. Wind. Maybe a distant owl if you're lucky. But here, nothing. Just the buzz of my own thoughts and something faint. So faint I couldn't tell if it was real or just leftover ringing in my ears from years around gunfire. It was like a hum. Low, constant, deep. The kind of sound you don't hear with your ears, but feel in your bones. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the radio in the corner crackled to life. I hadn't even touched the damn thing. It looked older than I was, the kind of radio with big knobs and wood paneling, the kind your grandpa kept in the garage. It should have been dead. I hadn't even noticed it when I walked in. But now it hissed with static, then a low voice broke through the fuzz. Just one sentence, calm and slow. "Do you hear it yet?" I stared at it, heart pounding, every inch of me alert like I was back on a recon mission. The voice was gone. Replaced again by static. Then silence. I checked the plug. It wasn't connected to anything. No batteries. No power. Nothing. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, staring at the unplugged radio until morning light spilled through the trees like a warning. Something was wrong with this place. And I hadn't even found the journal yet. The second night at the cabin was colder than the first. The wind howled through the pines like something lost was calling out, and the fireplace crackled weakly against the chill. I sat alone at the kitchen table, trying to make sense of my uncle's old grocery lists and property bills. The man kept everything, even a receipt for chewing gum from 1983. It was almost funny, until I found the floorboard. It happened by accident. I was reaching for a drop pen when I noticed it. One of the boards near the pantry door had a strange edge. Not splintered or worn, clean, like it had been lifted before. I tapped it with my knuckle. Hollow. I don't know what made me grab the crowbar. Maybe boredom. Maybe the feeling that the cabin was hiding something, the way a quiet person hides grief. It took some effort, but the board lifted with a groan. Dust exploded into the air. I waved it away and coughed. Beneath the floor was a shallow space, no more than a foot deep. A rectangular metal box sat there, wrapped in an old military jacket. My uncle's, I assumed. The fabric was faded, the name patch nearly unreadable. I pulled the box out and set it on the table. My heart was thudding in my chest, but I couldn't say why. It was just a box. A rusted latch snapped open. Inside, carefully packed in plastic, were 3 journals, 5 cassette tapes, and a folded map. There was also a photograph of 6 men in uniform standing in front of a chain-link fence with a sign that read, "Restricted, Echo, 9 Facility, Authorized Personnel Only." The photo was black and white, but their eyes said enough. Tired. Hollow. One of them was my uncle. Younger, stiffer, but the same face. He wasn't smiling. I opened the top journal. The pages were dense with notes. Diagrams of sound waves. Military stamps. And paragraphs filled with words like subsonic manipulation, psychological bleed, and resonant hallucinations. It didn't feel real. This was the kind of thing you'd see in a bad movie about Cold War secrets or rogue science experiments. Not something tucked away under a cabin floor. The last entry was dated April 7th, 1991. I read it out loud slowly. The experiment is buried, but not dead. Sound doesn't vanish, it waits. Echo, 9 must remain sealed. If anyone hears it again, don't follow. Not even in your dreams. I stared at the words. The handwriting grew shaky toward the end, like his hand had been trembling. I didn't understand what he meant. Sound that waits? Don't follow? Dreams? I glanced at the tapes. Each was labeled with a number. One simply read, "Do not play." I picked up the map. It was hand-drawn, detailed, and marked with a red X far into the mountains. The name of the location was underlined 3 times, Echo 9. I leaned back in my chair, trying to make sense of what I'd found. I was supposed to be here to rest. Heal. Instead, I was looking at a trail of breadcrumbs my uncle had left behind before he died. I told myself to put the box away, forget about it, and get some sleep. But as I reached for the lid, I swore I heard something faint, a low hum coming from the fireplace, like a wire vibrating in the walls. I stood still, holding my breath. It stopped. I shook my head and laughed nervously. "You're just tired, Noah," I said aloud. Still, that night, I left the box on the table. And I didn't sleep. Not really. Because when I closed my eyes, I could hear it again. A sound I couldn't describe. Like something old was trying to wake up. Something that remembered me. The night was heavy with silence, the kind that presses down on your skin and makes you feel like something is watching, even when nothing is there. The air inside the cabin had turned cold, too cold for late September. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, sat at the small wooden desk, and laid out everything I had found in the box. 3 old cassette tapes. A map with the words Echo 9 circled in red. Several worn journals, yellowed with age. I stared at the tape recorder, my hand hovering over the play button. I hesitated, not because I was afraid of what I'd hear, but because a part of me already knew. This wasn't going to be some harmless story about secret bunkers and paranoid soldiers. This was deeper, darker, real. I pressed play. A burst of static filled the room. The sound was jagged, sharp, like it was tearing through the air. Then a voice crackled through, a man's voice, slow and shaky. They told us the noise was harmless. Said it was just a frequency test. Background sound. Something to measure stress response. The tape clicked, then jumped to another recording. This one was quieter, almost a whisper. It's not the sound that gets you at first. It's what comes after. The dreams. The thoughts that aren't yours. The feeling that you're being followed. Even in the silence. I paused the tape. My hand was trembling. I didn't recognize the voice. It wasn't my uncle's, and it didn't match anything I'd heard before. But it felt familiar, like something I'd heard in the field. Those strange military experiments that never made it into briefing papers. I flipped open one of the journals and skimmed a few pages. The handwriting started off neat, but by the end, it was erratic, slanted, sometimes unreadable. September 12th, I saw something outside the perimeter. Not a man. Not an animal. It moved with the wind, but there was no wind. It knew I was watching. I swallowed hard. I could feel my pulse in my neck. The room seemed darker than before. The corners of the cabin had shadows that hadn't been there earlier. I stood up and checked the windows. Nothing. Just trees and fog. Still, the feeling wouldn't leave. That sense of being observed. I sat back down and played the second tape. More static. Then breathing. Ragged and uneven. Then a new voice, one I did recognize. My uncle. If you found this, it means you ignored my warnings. That's on you now, Noah. Echo 9 was never decommissioned. It was buried. But something down there is still alive. And it remembers us. The tape cut out. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. My breath fogged in front of me. Something was wrong with this place. With this story. And somehow I was part of it now. The wind outside picked up, whistling through the cracks in the window frame. I heard something in the static again, just for a second. A low tone, deep and unnatural, like it came from the earth itself. I stood, heart pounding, and shut off the recorder. But even after it stopped, the sound was still there. Faint. Far away. Calling me. The town was called Millstone Creek, but it looked more like a forgotten smudge on the map. A single gas station stood at the entrance, next to a diner that leaned too far to one side, like it had grown tired of standing straight. I parked my truck outside the diner and stepped out, the late autumn wind biting at my neck. Inside, the place smelled like burnt coffee and old grease. A waitress in her 60s gave me a glance, but didn't say anything. A couple of old men sat at the counter, sipping coffee, their flannel shirts faded from years of wear. I slid into a booth near the window. The leather cracked beneath me. I wasn't here for food. I pulled the journal from my backpack, placing it gently on the table. Its cover was scratched, pages yellowed. My uncle's handwriting danced along the edges like he had written in a hurry, or while scared. I flipped to the entry that mentioned Echo 9, and stared at the words until the waitress finally approached. "You want coffee?" she asked, pen already out. I nodded. "And some information, if you've got any." She raised a brow. "Depends what you're looking for." I tapped the journal. "Ever hear of something called Echo 9? Military base, maybe Cold War era?" The air changed. Subtle, like someone had turned the volume down in the room. One of the men at the counter stopped stirring his coffee. The waitress's smile dropped, just a hair. "Not much to know," she said. "Old training facility. Shut down decades ago. You won't find anything left but rust and stories." "That's exactly what I'm looking for," I said. "Stories." She left without answering. I looked over at the men at the counter. One of them, tall, skinny, with a beard that looked like it had been growing since the Reagan administration, was staring at me. When our eyes met, he nodded toward the door. 10 minutes later, I followed him out to the alley behind the diner. He lit a cigarette with shaky fingers. "You said Echo 9?" he asked. His voice was gravel and smoke. "You military?" "Used to be. Marine. My uncle, he was part of something out there. I found his journals after he died. They mention weird things. Frequencies. Voices." The man took a long drag, exhaled slowly. "You ever hear about the mountain that sings?" "No." "Well, it ain't no lullaby." He leaned back against the wall, cigarette trembling slightly. "They built Echo 9 into the side of Hollow Ridge. Said it was just communications training. But the folks working there? They came into town looking like ghosts. Eyes sunken. Jumped at their own shadows. We thought it was just stress. Government stuff. But then people started hearing things. Low hums late at night. Dogs barking at nothing. A whole family moved away after their youngest went missing." He paused, flicked ash to the ground. "They said she sleepwalked right into the woods. Never came back. What were they doing in there?" I asked. "No one knows for sure. But the rumors? They were messing with sound. Frequencies that mess with the brain. Said it could unlock parts of the mind or break it. Maybe both." I opened the journal, showing him one of the entries. Subject 12 responded to infrasound at 17 hertz. Screamed for 4 hours. Claimed she could hear the dead. The man looked at the page, then at me. "You want my advice? Leave it. Whatever your uncle was into, let it die with him. That place, it doesn't just take your mind. It takes something deeper." "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. Just took another long drag and walked away, leaving me in the alley with the cold wind and too many questions. I returned to the diner, grabbed the coffee I hadn't touched, and left a 5 on the table. As I got back in the truck, I looked out toward the horizon. Beyond the trees and the rolling hills, I knew the mountains stood quiet, but not silent. And maybe, just maybe, they were still singing. The wind howled like a wounded animal as I stood at the edge of the restricted zone. My boots crunched over brittle grass and gravel, the ground frozen solid under the weight of secrecy. I looked up at the rusted fence that loomed in front of me, barbed wire twisted along the top, and a faded government sign hung crooked on one corner. U.S. military property, do not enter. Trespassers will be prosecuted. The words were barely readable, like time itself had tried to erase what the government didn't want remembered. I pulled the collar of my jacket higher. The cold wasn't what made me shiver, it was the silence. No birds. No wind through trees. Just the soft hum in the back of my head, barely noticeable now, but always there since I found those journals. My uncle's words echoed inside me. If you hear it, don't follow. Not even in your dreams. And yet here I was. I followed the edge of the fence until I found a section where the metal had snapped loose, just wide enough for a man to slip through. I crouched, slipped under, and entered what the map had marked as Echo 9. The trees inside the fence were dead. Not dying, dead. Gray, hollow trunks stretched like bones into the sky. Their branches didn't sway. They just stood there, stiff and bare, as if holding their breath. I moved carefully, scanning for motion, traps, sensors, anything. Old instincts from my Marine days returned like muscle memory. I walked for almost 30 minutes, keeping my footsteps quiet. The dirt here felt different, softer, more brittle, like ash mixed with sand. It didn't smell right either. Every few yards, I passed broken poles and bits of rusted metal sticking out of the ground, like the skeleton of something buried long ago. Then I saw it. The outer gates of Echo 9. Two towering steel doors stretched up between tall concrete walls. The left gate hung open, just enough for a man to pass. Black scorch marks streaked the concrete around it, and a surveillance camera dangled from a snapped cable, its lens facing the ground. I hesitated. My heartbeat quickened. Every survival instinct screamed at me to turn around. But that same instinct told me something else too. Whatever happened here, it wasn't finished. I stepped through the gate. The moment I crossed that line, the air changed. I don't know how to describe it. It was like pressure, like the weight of the atmosphere had thickened, pressing down on my skin. The hum in my head grew louder, still low, still distant, but pulsing now like a slow heartbeat. The compound was larger than I expected. Broken-down barracks and half-collapsed buildings lined the main path. Weeds and vines had claimed the roads, creeping over cement like veins. The windows were all black, some shattered, others covered from the inside. At the far end stood the main structure, a massive bunker built into the hillside, its steel doors still intact. I approached one of the smaller buildings first. Looked like an old guardhouse. Inside, dust coated everything in a thick gray blanket. A broken chair lay on its side. A rusted radio sat on a desk, its antenna bent. I turned it on out of habit. Static. Then faintly a voice. Just for a second. A single word, whispered in a voice that wasn't mine. Noah. I froze. The radio went silent again. I stepped back, heart hammering now. My breath fogged in front of me, even though it wasn't that cold anymore. Something about this place, it bent reality. Twisted it just enough to make you doubt what you were hearing, what you were feeling. I backed out of the guardhouse and stared up at the main building. Echo 9 was calling me. Not in a way I could explain. Not with sound. It was something deeper, like a memory I hadn't lived yet. A pull in the back of my mind that said, "You've been here before. You just don't remember." I tightened my grip on the flashlight and walked toward the entrance. Whatever was inside had waited long enough. The gate creaked open with a long, aching groan, like it hadn't been touched in decades. Rust flaked off the hinges as I pushed it wider. Beyond it, a cracked concrete path stretched into the forest, leading to a wide metal door built into the hillside. Moss grew in the seams, and faded lettering above the door read, Echo 9, Research and Development. I stood there for a moment, listening. Silence. No birds. No wind. Just that low hum again, like something vibrating deep beneath the earth. I took a breath and stepped forward. The door wasn't locked. It slid open with a mechanical hiss, smoother than it had any right to be. Inside was pitch black until my flashlight flicked on and lit up a narrow hallway lined with peeling gray paint. The floor was covered in dust, but my boots left clear prints as I moved deeper. I couldn't help but notice the silence. It wasn't normal. It felt forced, like the whole building had swallowed sound itself. My footsteps were swallowed too, dull and muted. It was like walking through a dream. A few yards in, I found a hallway that led to what looked like a security checkpoint. Glass windows, shattered monitors, and an old chair that had tipped over. A coat still hung from the backrest, stiff with age. I leaned over the desk and saw an old name tag. Lieutenant H. Wheeler. I remembered that name. He was mentioned in one of the journal entries. Wheeler's the only one who hears them even when the machines are off, my uncle had written. I stared at the tag, wondering what Wheeler had heard. I turned a corner, and suddenly the sound changed. Not louder, just different. A deeper vibration. A bass-like throb that I could feel in my chest. I stopped walking and held my breath. It wasn't coming from the walls. It was inside them. Underneath them. Everywhere. I pressed my hand against the wall. It was warm. That made no sense. The power should have been cut decades ago, yet some of the hallway lights flickered faintly to life as I passed. Each flicker sent shadows stretching and twitching across the cracked floors. One of them moved when I didn't. I froze. I swung my flashlight back, scanning behind me. Nothing. Just the flickering light and the quiet hum of something I couldn't see. I kept walking. The rooms I passed had no names, just numbers stenciled on dented metal doors. Room 004 had what looked like deep scratch marks across it. 5 long gashes, almost like claw marks. I didn't stop to open it. Room 007's door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open with the tip of my boot. The room inside was small and padded, walls lined with thick, egg crate-like foam. A single metal chair sat in the center, bolted to the floor, with leather restraints dangling from the arms. A speaker was embedded into the wall across from it. Cracked, but not broken. I stepped in and suddenly felt dizzy. It was like the air was heavier inside. My ears popped. I looked around and saw faint stains on the padding. Not red, more like black ink. Like it had been seeping from inside the walls. I backed out slowly, not taking my eyes off the chair. The further I moved through the halls, the more I realized something. This place wasn't abandoned. Not really. It was quiet, yes. Dead quiet. But not dead. Some rooms still had blinking red lights. A humming server room glowed behind a reinforced glass door. I saw movement on one of the monitors, just a flicker, a shadow shifting in an empty corridor. My corridor. I spun around. Nothing. I could feel my heart pounding in my throat. Then I heard it, barely a whisper, but it chilled me more than anything else that night. Noah. The voice wasn't in the air. It was in my bones. Like it had bypassed my ears completely and gone straight into my spine. I ran. I don't remember choosing to. My legs just moved. I sprinted past rooms, through tight halls, dodging old gurneys and overturned carts. The lights flickered wildly as I passed. That hum grew louder with every step. I didn't stop until I reached a large circular chamber with a domed ceiling. Giant black speakers lined the walls, all of them aimed inward toward the center of the room. There were no windows, no doors, just speakers, and blood stains on the floor that had dried in concentric circles. In the middle of the room was a control panel with one switch flipped to on. The hum was deafening now. I stepped toward it, and every hair on my body stood up. I didn't know what this machine was, but I knew what it did. It listened. And maybe worse, it spoke back. I reached for the switch. And that's when the humming stopped. The silence was so loud it made my ears ring. I turned and looked back at the hallway I had come from. There was something standing at the far end. Not walking. Not moving. Just standing. Watching. I blinked, and it was gone. But I knew what I saw. The facility had breathed me in. And now it wasn't letting go. I should have left the second I heard that humming again. The moment I stepped into the northern corridor, it returned, low, steady, like the breath of something ancient, buried beneath concrete and rust. My flashlight flickered, casting long shadows on the moldy walls. The floor was coated in dust and fallen tiles, and every step felt like I was walking deeper into the lungs of something alive. Then I saw him. At first, I thought it was another hallucination, just another ghost from my mind playing tricks. But he didn't fade. He stood still at the end of the hallway, a figure in a dark coat, hands calmly folded behind his back, as if he'd been waiting for me. Didn't expect company, he said. His voice didn't echo like mine had in the silence. It was solid. Real. It reached me like a rope thrown in the dark. I gripped the flashlight tighter. Who are you? He took a few slow steps toward me. His boots barely made a sound. I noticed the fine cut of his coat, something old but well kept. His face came into view, sharply carved, with a neat beard streaked with gray. Eyes calm. Cold. I could ask you the same, he said. This place isn't exactly on any maps anymore. I followed my uncle's journals, I said. He was here. Part of whatever this was. His eyes didn't flinch. Then your uncle was a very foolish man. I didn't like the way he said that. I found tapes. Footage. Project Syrinx. What were you doing here? What did you turn those people into? For a moment, silence. He looked past me, into the dark hallway I'd come from, like he was checking to see if we were alone. My name is James Thorne, he said. I was the lead on Syrinx. At least, until it became something else. I felt my throat dry. This was the man. The name that appeared again and again in the journals. Always signed in red ink. Always followed by silence. I thought this place was abandoned, I said. He chuckled softly. It was. Until I came back. Someone had to keep the doors locked. I stepped closer. Why? He looked me dead in the eye. Because if people knew what we found here, they'd tear it open. And some things were never meant to be opened again. I didn't move. Neither did he. The air between us felt heavy, like something was pressing on both of our chests. Tell me the truth, I said. What did you do to those people? James let out a long, slow breath. We thought we could control fear. That if we understood how it worked in the brain, we could weaponize it. But fear isn't just chemical. It's ancient. Deeper than biology. We touched something that touches back. My stomach tightened. Subject 17? He turned away. You've seen the tapes. Yeah. I saw more than I wanted to. He walked down the hall, motioning for me to follow. Against every instinct I had, I did. We entered a small office with cracked walls and flickering lights. Charts and photos still hung from rusted pins. A map of the brain with deep red markings across the amygdala. In one corner, a tape player sat half-crushed beneath a broken chair. James sat down on the desk, his coat dusted with ash. We tested frequencies. Low ones. Below human hearing. They reached the parts of the brain that hide our oldest memories. Things we inherited from animals, from shadows and caves. That's what we unlocked. He looked at me. We made the mistake of thinking fear was just a reflex. But it's a language, and we taught it to speak. I stared at him, at the walls, at the soundless scream that seemed to echo from the broken speakers. And you stayed here? I asked. All this time? I had to. Someone had to keep it quiet. And what about me? I asked. He stood slowly, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of pity in his eyes. You shouldn't be here, Noah. You've already heard too much. I took a step back. You going to kill me? He didn't answer. Outside, the humming grew louder, and beneath it, a whisper. Something was awake, and it was listening. I shouldn't have gone deeper. The halls inside echo. 9 were narrow and cold, like walking through the throat of some forgotten machine. My boots made soft, hollow thuds against the concrete, and every door I passed looked identical, metal, dented and numbered in peeling paint. I followed the map from my uncle's journal, a shaky line drawn in pencil that led to a place labeled ARCHIV. I stopped in front of a thick door marked Sublevel 3, Access Restricted. It had a keypad, long dead, and a rusted hinge that groaned when I shoved the door open with my shoulder. A cloud of dust spilled out like breath from a sleeping beast. Inside was a storage room lined with filing cabinets, old reels of film, and a wall of humming machines, still alive, still pulsing. The air buzzed faintly, like static under the skin. I felt it in my teeth. That same frequency I'd been hearing in my dreams. I found a box labeled Syrinx Cases Classified. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were videotapes, some still sealed. Each tape had a number and a name, handwritten in red ink. I picked one at random. Test 12 Subject, Caleb Mercer, April 12, 1974. There was an old projector stacked in the corner. By some miracle, it still worked. I fed the tape in and flipped the switch. The reel clattered to life, casting flickering light across the far wall. Static. Then, the image of a man sitting in a padded room. Shirtless. Thin. Eyes wide. The date in the corner matched the tape label. A voice came through, calm, clinical. Subject has been exposed to frequency 18B for 12 minutes. Observing cognitive response. At first, nothing happened. Caleb just stared into space. Then his mouth twitched. He blinked once, twice, then began to mutter. The sound was low, rhythmic. Like chanting. The words didn't make sense, half in English, half something else. His hands started to shake. Subject now entering stage 2, vocal instability, the voice said. Caleb's muttering turned to screaming. It wasn't loud. Not at first. But it built, raw, animal, terrifying. He scratched at the walls with his nails, carving deep, jagged lines into the foam. His body jerked like a puppet, eyes rolled back, and blood leaked from his ears. Then the screen went black. No end of recording. No follow-up. Just silence. I played 2 more tapes. One subject laughed until their jaw dislocated. Another curled into a corner and didn't move for hours, rocking back and forth like they were trying to escape their own mind. Some were soldiers. Others civilians. One was a teenage girl. All exposed to the same frequency. Project Syrinx wasn't just a psychological experiment. It was a weapon made of sound. A page from a file folder slid out and landed at my feet. I picked it up. At the top it read, Subject 17 status, unresolved. Symptoms, unstoppable echo repetition. Full neurological collapse. Audio containment failed. And scribbled beneath it, in handwriting I recognized as my uncle's. If you hear him speak, it's already too late. The projector began to whine. But I hadn't pressed anything. The screen flickered on again. No labels. No file number. Just darkness. Then a whisper. So faint I thought it came from behind me. A single phrase, repeated over and over in a voice that didn't sound human. He listens. He listens. He listens. I turned off the projector. The room stayed cold. And the whisper didn't stop. Not even when I left. Not even now. I don't remember falling asleep. One moment, I was staring at the security footage I'd found in one of the lower rooms, grainy black and white film showing a man strapped to a gurney, trembling to some unseen rhythm. And the next, I was waking up on the cold tile floor, my neck aching, my head ringing. The hum had changed. It was no longer just low and steady, like a machine running in the walls. It was rising and falling now, pulsing, almost breathing. I sat up slowly, blinking in the dim red glow of the emergency lights. The hum seemed to press against my ears, not loud, but deep. I felt it more than I heard it, like it was inside my bones. I grabbed my flashlight and checked my watch. 2:13 a.m. The silence around me was thick, like it was waiting for something. Then I heard it. Movement. Not the kind that echoes through long halls like rats or old pipes. This was soft, heavy, deliberate. Footsteps, but not quite human. More like something dragging part of itself as it walked. I held my breath. The sound was coming from the hallway just beyond the archive room. My heart started pounding. Every instinct I'd ever sharpened in the field screamed for me to stay down, to stay hidden. But curiosity, that cursed itch, pulled me forward. I edged toward the door and peeked through the cracked opening. The hallway was long, painted with flaking gray paint, and lined with old doors, most sealed shut. At the far end, a single metal door I hadn't noticed before was open. Not wide, just enough to show darkness inside. A light flickered above it, making the shadows dance like they were alive. That's when I saw it. A shape moved past the opening, just a glimpse. Thin, crooked. It didn't walk like a man. It swayed. It shuffled. Its head was tilted, and something about it felt wrong, like it had forgotten how to be human. My pulse skipped. I knew right away what it was. Subject 17. I waited, frozen, until the footsteps faded. Then, flashlight shaking in my hand, I crept down the hall toward the door. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe that I'd get close enough to see, to confirm, then run. Maybe I thought this was all part of the trauma, a hallucination cooked up by my broken brain. But when I reached the door and stepped inside, I knew I hadn't imagined any of it. The room beyond was large and circular. The walls were covered in thick black acoustic foam, the kind used in soundproof chambers. The air was dense, heavy with the smell of old metal and something rotting. At the center of the room stood a chair bolted to the ground, surrounded by coils of wires and a cluster of old speakers hanging from the ceiling like meat hooks. And crouched beside the chair was the figure. It was thin, emaciated, bare skin stretched tight over bones, covered in faded scars. Its head was bald, and its ears were missing. Sliced off clean. The thing was whispering, low, repetitive words in a language I didn't recognize. It rocked back and forth like a child in the dark. I tried to back away, but the floor creaked. The thing's head snapped toward me. Its eyes, they didn't blink. They didn't even really see me. They just stared like they were remembering something. And then it stood, slow and twitching, its joints moving like they were stiff from centuries of disuse. It opened its mouth. Not to scream. To mimic. The thing repeated my breath. Matched my heartbeat. Then it spoke, in a voice that was almost mine. You heard it too. I didn't wait. I turned and ran, heart hammering, down the hallway, through the rusted doors, back into the archives. I slammed the door shut behind me and pressed my back against it, breathing hard. In the silence, I heard a soft whisper. Not from outside. From inside my own mind. It repeated what it said in the chamber. You heard it too. And for the first time since arriving at Echo 9, I understood what the journals meant. It doesn't just affect you. It listens. And once it hears you, it never forgets. I don't remember falling asleep. One moment I was sitting in the control room, staring at the flickering monitors, and the next, I was somewhere else entirely. I was back in Afghanistan. The sun burned white above me, and the sand crunched beneath my boots. My rifle was heavy in my hands. I could hear the hum of a drone overhead, the same low buzz I've heard too many times before. But something was wrong. The buildings were twisted, like they had melted and reformed into jagged shapes. And the faces of the villagers, they had no eyes. Just smooth, pale skin where their eyes should have been. They opened their mouths, and that hum came pouring out, louder and louder, until it filled the world. I jerked awake, sweating, heart racing. But I wasn't in the control room anymore. I was in one of the patient cells. The door was open. A single red light blinked above me. I stood up slowly, my knees weak. The humming was still there, faint, like it was coming from the walls themselves. I felt it in my teeth, in my bones. My thoughts were muddy, like trying to think through water. I checked my watch. The second hand wasn't moving. I shook it, tapped the glass. Still frozen. The hallway outside was dark except for a flickering light at the far end. I walked toward it, my boots echoing in the silence. But it wasn't really silent. Not anymore. The hum was deeper now, almost like a voice trying to form words. It was right on the edge of hearing, impossible to ignore. I passed a mirror on the wall. At least, I thought it was a mirror. But my reflection didn't move the way I did. I turned my head. The reflection didn't. It stared back at me with sunken eyes, mouth slightly open, as if it was about to speak. I smashed it with the butt of my flashlight. Glass scattered across the floor. I kept walking. I started seeing strange things in the corners of my eyes. Shadows that didn't move with the light. Figures standing at the end of the hallway, only to vanish when I looked directly at them. I tried to tell myself it was just sleep deprivation, that I was tired and the constant sound was messing with my head. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the full truth. This place was alive. It remembered everything that happened here, and it was showing it to me. I reached the security room and found the journals I had stashed earlier. I flipped one open, hoping to ground myself, to remember why I came here. But the words were different. The entry that used to read, Test 17 resisted treatment today, now read, You're not supposed to be here, Noah. I dropped the book. My hands were shaking. Suddenly, the loudspeakers crackled to life. A voice came through, faint, whispering in a loop. Hear it. Feel it. Become it. The lights dimmed. I ran. I didn't care where. I just needed to move, to get away from the voice, the mirrors, the hum that was getting louder with every step. I turned a corner and found myself back at the lab with the sound chamber. The door was cracked open. Inside, I saw the chair where Subject 17 had been strapped. But the restraints were broken now. Scratched. Bent. Something had been strong enough to get free. And on the far wall, smeared in something dark and wet, were the words. It never stopped. I stumbled back, hit the doorframe, and nearly fell. I don't remember falling asleep. One moment I was sitting in the control room, staring at the flickering monitors, and the next, I was somewhere else entirely. I was back in Afghanistan. The sun burned white above me, and the sand crunched beneath my boots. My rifle was heavy in my hands. I could hear the hum of a drone overhead, the same low buzz I've heard too many times before. But something was wrong. The buildings were twisted, like they had melted and reformed into jagged shapes. And the faces of the villagers, they had no eyes. Just smooth, pale skin where their eyes should have been. They opened their mouths, and that hum came pouring out, louder and louder, until it filled the world. I jerked awake, sweating, heart racing. But I wasn't in the control room anymore. I was in one of the patient cells. The door was open. A single red light blinked above me. I stood up slowly, my knees weak. The humming was still there, faint, like it was coming from the walls themselves. I felt it in my teeth, in my bones. My thoughts were muddy, like trying to think through water. I checked my watch. The second hand wasn't moving. I shook it, tapped the glass. Still frozen. The hallway outside was dark except for a flickering light at the far end. I walked toward it, my boots echoing in the silence. But it wasn't really silent. Not anymore. The hum was deeper now, almost like a voice trying to form words. It was right on the edge of hearing, impossible to ignore. I passed a mirror on the wall. At least, I thought it was a mirror. But my reflection didn't move the way I did. I turned my head. The reflection didn't. It stared back at me with sunken eyes, mouth slightly open, as if it was about to speak. I smashed it with the butt of my flashlight. Glass scattered across the floor. I kept walking. I started seeing strange things in the corners of my eyes. Shadows that didn't move with the light. Figures standing at the end of the hallway, only to vanish when I looked directly at them. I tried to tell myself it was just sleep deprivation, that I was tired and the constant sound was messing with my head. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the full truth. This place was alive. It remembered everything that happened here, and it was showing it to me. I reached the security room and found the journals I had stashed earlier. I flipped one open, hoping to ground myself, to remember why I came here. But the words were different. The entry that used to read, Test 17 resisted treatment today, now read, You're not supposed to be here, Noah. I dropped the book. My hands were shaking. Suddenly, the loudspeakers crackled to life. A voice came through, faint, whispering in a loop. Hear it. Feel it. Become it. The lights dimmed. I ran. I didn't care where. I just needed to move, to get away from the voice, the mirrors, the hum that was getting louder with every step. I turned a corner and found myself back at the lab with the sound chamber. The door was cracked open. Inside, I saw the chair where Subject 17 had been strapped. But the restraints were broken now. Scratched. Bent. Something had been strong enough to get free. And on the far wall, smeared in something dark and wet, were the words. It never stopped. I stumbled back, hit the doorframe, and nearly fell. Voices started to rise around me. Not just from the speakers, but from the air, from the walls, from inside my head. My ears popped like I was diving underwater. I screamed, but I couldn't even hear myself anymore. Only that frequency, that godforsaken tone that wasn't just sound, it was a feeling. A presence. It was crawling inside my mind. The last thing I remember before blacking out was a figure stepping into the hallway. It was tall, thin, its face wrapped in gauze. No eyes. No mouth. Just a hum, deep and steady, coming from its chest. And then darkness. When I woke up, I was back in the control room again. The monitors were still flickering. My watch was ticking. Had it all been a dream? No, because when I looked down at my hands, they were covered in blood that wasn't mine. And the journal I dropped earlier? It was sitting on the desk. Still open. Still saying, "You're not supposed to be here, Noah." I found James in the control room. The walls were lined with screens, most of them flickering between static and blackness. A few showed grainy footage from old security cameras, empty halls, broken doors, shadows that moved when nothing should. The air was thick with a low hum, like a giant sleeping under the floor, breathing through steel lungs. James was standing in front of one of the monitors. His back was to me. He didn't flinch when I came in. Maybe he heard me. Maybe he didn't need to. "I figured you'd get this far," he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. He turned slowly. His face looked older in this light. Tired, like a man carrying something heavy for far too long. His white coat was stained with dust and dark patches I didn't want to identify. "You've read the journals," he said. "Listened to the tapes." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. "You're here for the truth," he said. "Everyone who comes here is. But you're not ready for it, Noah." He knew my name. I don't remember ever telling him. I took a step closer. "What is Project Syrinx?" James walked to a console and picked up a rusted folder. He opened it and tossed it onto a metal table in front of me. The pages were yellowed, corners curled, words faded, but I saw enough. Human trials. Sound frequencies. Psychological manipulation. "What they don't teach you in the military," he said, "is how sound can rewrite a mind." He looked straight at me. "We weren't trying to kill people," he said. "We were trying to control them. Thoughts. Emotions. Fear. Love. With the right frequency, we could make a man obey. Or make him forget who he was." I stared at him, the words slow to settle in my brain. "You're talking about mind control." "No," he said. "Worse. We were trying to change what it means to be human." He walked over to the largest monitor. It showed a grainy black and white video. A woman sat in a chair, wires attached to her temples. A low, vibrating tone filled the speakers. She twitched, screamed, then started laughing. Her eyes rolled back. Blood came from her nose. "We thought we were doing something good," James whispered. "That if we got it right, we could stop war before it started. We could make enemies surrender without a shot fired." "And what happened?" I asked. He pointed to the monitor. "They broke. Every one of them. Some turned violent. Some stopped speaking altogether. And one, Subject 17, started talking in echoes. Repeating things we never said. Words we hadn't written. It was like the sound reached a part of the brain no one had mapped yet. A doorway. A doorway to what?" He shook his head. "I don't know. But it changed them. And the worst part was, it didn't stop. Even when we shut down the machines, the frequency was still inside them." I felt my stomach twist. My fingers tingled. I remembered the humming I kept hearing. The dreams. The feeling that something was watching me through the walls. "You're infected too," James said. "Just being here, breathing the air, it gets in." I backed away. "Why didn't you destroy this place?" He looked at me with a haunted expression. "Because destroying it doesn't erase what we learned. Doesn't stop what it did to us." He pulled something from his coat pocket, a small device the size of a pager. It had one red button. "This is the failsafe," he said. "Push it, and the power core melts down. It'll collapse the whole mountain." I stared at it. "I can't do it," he said. "Because part of me still believes the data is worth saving. That it could help someone someday. But I'm not sure anymore." Silence stretched between us, thick as smoke. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I didn't answer. Not yet. I took the device from his hand and looked at the button. Somewhere far below us, I felt a faint rumble, like something had started moving again. Something that had been sleeping. And now it was listening. Waiting. Ready. I looked James in the eyes. "I don't know what I'm going to do," I said. "But I think we're out of time." And just then, the monitors went black. Every single one. Except one. And on it, I saw my face, live footage, from inside a hallway I hadn't stepped into yet. But I was already there. Or something that looked like me was. Watching. Smiling. I don't remember how long I ran. My boots echoed across the metal floor, and the flickering red lights made every corner look like it was bleeding. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out the hum, for a while. But it always came back. That sound. Low, constant, like the earth itself was growling beneath me. I'd left the main lab behind. My flashlight flickered, batteries dying, but I couldn't stop. I could still hear James shouting behind me. At first, I thought he was chasing me. But then I realized he wasn't shouting at me. He was warning me. I turned down a narrow hallway lined with shattered observation windows. Inside the rooms were rusted gurneys, loose restraints dangling off the sides. Dried blood stained the corners. Some of it looked fresh. Or maybe my mind was playing tricks on me again. I don't know anymore. As I slowed to catch my breath, the hum grew sharper. It wasn't just noise anymore, it was words. Not ones I understood, but they were there, crawling just below the edge of hearing. Like whispers trapped underwater. That's when I heard the footsteps. Not James. These were heavier. Slower. Wet. I held my breath and ducked into one of the side rooms, pressing myself behind a row of rusted lockers. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep my flashlight steady. The hallway fell silent. Then, from the red haze, a shadow moved. Large. Lurching. It dragged something behind it, something that left a smear across the metal floor. I didn't dare look too close, but I saw its skin, or what was left of it, pale, stretched like melted wax. Its head tilted as if listening. No eyes, just a smooth face with a gaping, trembling mouth. It sniffed the air, and then it spoke, but it wasn't a voice. It was the hum. It twisted into something like speech, broken, reversed, unnatural. "Noah! Noah, stay down." My lungs froze. It knew my name. It began walking again, slow, confident, as if it didn't need to rush. I waited until the hum faded down the hall, and I forced myself out of the room, barely able to stand. Then I heard James scream. It came from deep below, past the research wing. I shouldn't have cared. He tried to kill me. Lied to me. Used me. But something told me I needed him now. I followed the sound. The stairs downward were rusted and bent, and every creak made me flinch. When I reached the lower level, it was colder, wetter. The walls sweated. The air pulsed with the hum. At the end of the hall, I found James. He was backed into a corner, bleeding from his forehead, eyes wide with terror. Standing in front of him, or looming, was Subject 17. The creature. The result of whatever nightmare this place had created. It wasn't attacking him. Not yet. It just stood there, watching with that blank, lipless mouth, trembling as if speaking prayers only it could hear. James looked at me. "You don't understand," he gasped. "It's not a test subject anymore. It's the signal. It's the source." "What are you talking about?" I asked, stepping closer. He laughed, a broken, mad kind of laugh. "We didn't make it. We woke it up. The sound, the frequency, it's alive. It used him to get out." Subject 17 turned toward me. Slowly. It didn't walk. It glided. My flashlight flickered again. I raised the gun I'd taken earlier, hands shaking. The creature tilted its head. Then it opened its mouth. The hum surged like a wave. It pushed into my ears, my mind, my bones. I dropped the flashlight. My knees buckled. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. James fell to the ground, clutching his head. Blood trickled from his ears. I don't remember pulling the trigger. But the gun fired. Once. Twice. Then I ran. I didn't look back. The corridor shook. Lights burst. Somewhere, a siren began to blare, a sound I hadn't heard in hours. It meant the failsafe had triggered. The facility was collapsing. Behind me, metal tore. Concrete cracked. And beneath it all, the hum screamed. Not sound. Pain. I reached the upper levels, stumbling into the server wing, the heart of it all. I didn't know how much time I had left. But I knew one thing. This place was trying to bury itself. And it wanted to take the truth down with it. I wasn't going to let it. Not yet. I don't remember how many turns I took to get here. The corridors all looked the same. Peeling white walls, rusted doors, flickering red lights. My legs felt like they were moving on their own, driven by instinct more than thought. I was soaked in sweat, dirt smeared across my face, and a buzzing in my ears that hadn't stopped since I stepped into this place. But now, I stood in front of a door unlike the others. It was large. Steel. No label. No keypad. Just a small, humming vibration coming from behind it. I placed my hand on it, and the metal was warm. Like something was alive on the other side. I pushed. The door creaked open slowly. The room was massive, much larger than I expected. The ceiling arched high above, lost in shadows. Giant machines lined the walls, blinking with soft green and red lights. In the center, there was a glass chamber shaped like a dome. Inside it, a pulsing sphere floated midair. It wasn't touching anything. It just hovered. That's when I felt it. The sound. Not loud. Not even a noise, really. It was a pressure, a hum inside my skull. Like someone had turned on an engine deep inside my brain. My vision shook for a second, and I stumbled forward, catching myself on a console. The screens lit up at my touch. Project Syrinx, core active. Status, unstable. Subject signal locked, 17. The machine was still running. After all these years, this thing was still breathing. I scanned the room for something, anything. Tapes, files, switches. Then I saw a small panel beneath the console labeled Manual Override. It had 2 buttons, red and green. Next to them, in faded letters. Upload, purge. I froze. Upload it, and the world would know. People would see the tapes, read the journals, hear the frequency if they dared. But they'd never be the same. Purge it, and it all dies with me. Footsteps. I turned sharply. James was standing in the doorway, gun in hand. His face was pale, and he looked older now, worn out and hollow. His voice was tired, like he hadn't slept in years. Don't do it, Noah. I didn't say anything. You think this truth will help people? You think they'll thank you for it? He stepped closer. They'll tear each other apart. Mass hysteria. You've seen what it does. Subject 17 was just the beginning. The air inside the core room felt alive, thick with vibration. It wasn't just noise anymore. It was pressure. It pressed against my chest like an invisible hand, making it hard to breathe. The walls hummed with a low, constant frequency that rattled in my bones. My teeth hurt. My thoughts came in waves, fractured and strange, like echoes of themselves. I stumbled forward, the flashlight flickering in my hand. The room wasn't what I expected. It didn't look like a lab or a control center. It looked like a cathedral built for sound. The floor was a dark metal grate, and beneath it, hundreds of wires twisted like roots. In the center stood a tall glass chamber, pulsing with a faint blue light. Inside, I saw the source, a spinning cylinder covered in strange symbols and cables, rotating with a mechanical hum. This was it. The heart of Echo 9. The machine that broke minds. My ears buzzed, like something inside me was trying to shake loose. I dropped to one knee, coughing hard, blood splattering on the floor. My vision blurred. I could hear things, not voices exactly, but feelings shaped like sound. Grief. Fear. Madness. All layered over one another like a broken symphony. Suddenly, I wasn't alone. James stepped into the room, limping, holding a pistol at his side. His face was pale, almost green in the dim light. Sweat poured down his neck, and his eyes were wild. You shouldn't have come this far, Noah, he said, his voice trembling. You don't understand what you're playing with. I raised my eyes to him, barely able to keep my head up. I understand enough. This place, this project, it ruined lives. Including mine. James took a slow step forward. It was never about hurting people. It was about control. Prevention. We were trying to create a system that could suppress chaos before it started. Before riots, before panic, before war. By driving people insane? I coughed again. By turning sound into a weapon? It worked, he said quietly. Too well. The first subjects didn't just hear the frequencies. They changed because of them. They became something else. Like Subject 17, I whispered. James froze. You saw it? I nodded. It's not human anymore. He looked around nervously. Then it's coming. And we don't have much time. I stood, weak but steady. We can still destroy it. All of it. James raised the pistol. I can't let you do that. My heart dropped. I've spent years keeping this buried, he said, eyes wide. You think uploading the files or blowing this place up will make anything better? The world isn't ready for the truth. They'll panic. Collapse. Maybe, I said, stepping toward the console. But I'd rather live in chaos than under a lie. James didn't hesitate. He fired. The shot missed, barely, ricocheting off a pipe. I dove behind a control panel, my ears ringing from the blast. The sound, the hum, grew louder, sharper, like it was feeding off the violence. The entire room vibrated. And then we heard it. A soft, layered whisper, like a child humming a lullaby through broken glass. It slithered from the hallway, closer and closer. James backed away from the door. No, it can't be loose. It was. Subject 17 crawled into the room, its eyes empty, skin stretched thin, mouth constantly moving in whispers none of us could understand. It wasn't in pain. It was something worse. It was singing. James fired again, but the creature didn't stop. It lunged. What happened next was chaos. Screams. Gunshots. A flash of blood on metal. I didn't wait. I ran to the console and yanked open the panel. Wires sparked. Alarms blared. I smashed the emergency power switch. The sound cut. Everything went silent. The humming stopped. James was on the ground, motionless. Subject 17 had vanished into the dark, like it had never been there. Or maybe it had become part of the silence. I stood over the console, heart pounding, staring at a small blinking screen. Upload files, it asked. My hand hovered over the keyboard. The world would never be the same. But neither would I. I clicked yes. Then I grabbed one of the journals, shoved a cassette into my bag, and staggered out of the facility as everything behind me began to collapse. The walls shivered, lights died, and the mountain swallowed Echo 9 whole. And still, in the back of my mind, a single low note pulsed, faint and constant, like a signal waiting to be heard again. The motel room smelled like old dust and damp carpet. One flickering light bulb buzzed above me, casting a pale yellow glow over the stained walls. I hadn't slept in 2 days, maybe 3. The only thing keeping me awake now was the cold grip of fear, curling tighter around my chest with every breath. The laptop sat on the chipped table in front of me, its screen glowing faintly in the dark. The upload bar moved slowly, like it knew what it was carrying. A single corrupted file. A journal. An audio recording filled with things not meant to be heard. Things I still couldn't explain. Outside, the night was dead quiet. Too quiet. I leaned back in the creaky chair and stared at the laptop. My fingers trembled. Not from the cold. I wasn't even sure if I felt temperature anymore, but from the weight of what I was about to do. It all started with that floorboard in the cabin. I thought I was uncovering a family secret. Maybe some more stuff my uncle had buried and forgotten. But what I found, it wasn't just classified. It wasn't just a lie. It was something alive. Something that listened. I reached into my backpack and pulled out the tape recorder. It was old and beat up, but it had survived the collapse. Just like me. I hit play. The recording crackled for a moment before settling into that low hum. The same hum I heard in the walls of Echo 9. The same hum that started crawling into my head and never really left. Then came the voice. No words, just a whisper. A tone that changed pitch in a way that made my skin crawl. It wasn't speaking to me. It was looking for me. I hit stop and shoved the recorder away. The bar on the screen crept past 70%. I should have destroyed it all. I had the chance. But something told me, the truth doesn't burn so easily. And if I didn't share it, someone else would find it anyway. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not next year. But one day. And maybe they wouldn't get out. My phone buzzed once. A notification. Upload complete. The screen blinked. And that's when I heard it again. The radio in the corner, something I hadn't even noticed until now, came to life on its own. No music. No voices. Just static. Then, buried in the fuzz, came the hum. That same low, pulsing rhythm. Like a heartbeat. Like breathing. I stood up slowly. It was here. Not the creature. Not James. Not the bass. The sound. It had followed me. Or maybe it was always inside me. From the moment I first opened that journal. From the moment I first listened. I stared at the laptop screen one last time, feeling my pulse match the rhythm of the hum. Then I whispered into the silence. Some truths you survive. Others you inherit. The hum grew louder. And the lights went out.